Hello everyone, in today's tutorial we're going to learn about two-dimensional arrays in C++. If 2D arrays feel confusing, this video will make them simple in minutes. So think of a 2D array as a table that contains rows and columns. With an important note that indexing in C++ starts with 0. So the first row is at index number 0. So if we were to access an element in row number 9, so we need to index it as 8. So you always deduct 1. If it was in column number 4, we need to index it as a 3 in the second closed bracket. So let's see first how we can declare an array. So we can follow this syntax here. So we start with the data type, which is int, double, character, or any data type, followed by an array name. This is of your choice. And then followed by two square brackets. The first one contains the number of rows. Those should be positive integers, should not contain a negative value. And then the second one will have a number which determine the number of columns. So if we were to declare an array with 3 rows and 4 columns, so we will put 3 in here and 4 in here. So let's declare, for simplicity, let's declare a 2 by 2 array. So in order to do this, first the data type is integer. We want it to contain integer numbers. Now let's call it array. And then the first one will contain the number of rows. Let's initialize it to 2. And then let's declare the number of columns as 2. So this way we declared an array that should contain 2 rows and 2 columns. There's another way to declare an array, so we can call this one rows or any name, and then we can call this one calls for columns. But we just need to define those variables here on top as constant integer. So this will be const int rows equal 2 rows is fine, and then const int calls for number of columns equal 2 is fine as well. So now we declared an array. So how can we initialize, actually put some values in this array? In order to do this, this will be very simple. So we need curly brackets, and then inside them we need curly brackets for each row. So since this one will have 2 rows, we need this one will contain data for the first row, and then comma separator, and then we need 2 other closed curly brackets for the second row. So in the first row, let's put any 2 random elements, 2 and 16. And then in the second row, let's put 5 and 9. So now we declared an array, and then we initialize it with some values. You can write it as follows, just like to make it more intuitive. So you can do it like this. This will be the first row, second row, first column, second column. So let's see how we can access elements in the array. So let's print them out to the screen. So we can use cout and then array, the name of the array, we call it array. If we were to access the element in row number 1, so when we need to deduct 1 because indexing starts at 0. So this will be row number 1 will be index 0, and column number 1 will be index 0. This will be the first element. Row number 1, column number 1 will be this one here. So when we execute this program, this should print 2 to the screen. Let's verify, and that's as expected. So but if we were to access the element in the first row, so we keep 0, second column, so we do index 1. So now this should print the element in the first row, second column. 16 as expected. So next, let's see how we can print the entire array to the screen. So in order to do this, we need to use nested loops, 4 nested loops. So the first one, to loop through all the rows. So we initialize I equals 0 as long as I is less than the number of rows, which we called rows in this case, and then we're going to increment I++. Then also we need another for loop inside this for loop to loop through all the columns. So for, since I is taken, let's use j, start initialize it with 0. As long as j is less than the number of columns, we're going to do j++. And then inside this for loop, we're going to print the elements. So we're going to use a cout array of ij. Between the elements, we need some kind of separator. So let's use a space. And then when we loop through all the columns, for the first row, we need to start the second row. So we need to do a new line, cout end line. So let's just like explain those nested for loops really quick. So we start with I equals 0 for the first row, and then we move to the second for loop for the columns. We start with 0, so we print the element A00. And then we increment j from 0 to 1. Is 1 still less than 2? Yes. So we print the element array of 0, 1, which is this element here. And then we increment j to 2, and then we check. Is 2 less than 2? Wrong. Then we move to the next line after this for loop. We start a new line, and then we loop back in the first for loop. We increment I from 0 to 1. Is 1 less than 2? Correct. Then we execute this for loop to print the entire second row. So it seems we're missing something, so expected a semicolon. So we're missing a semicolon somewhere. We're missing it in this location. This should be semicolon. So let's execute this program and see if we print the entire array. So now we printed the entire array to the screen, 216, 59. So now let's see, sometimes we want the user actually to enter the array and save it in the array we name it. So in order to ask the user to enter the numbers, the elements of the array, so let's see how we can do this. So let's get rid of the initialization because we want the user to do it. So to do this, we're going to use nested for loops, but instead of the cout, we're going to use cn. So cn, take the number from the user and save it in the elements of the array we called array. So cn array of ij, and we don't need a new line. So now when we execute this program, we're gonna ask the user to enter the elements of the array. In order to make it a little bit more intuitive, so we can do this. We can do cout before this nested for loops, and then ask the user enter a 2 by 2 matrix. Then we can start a new line. So let's execute this program. So we told the user enter 2 by 2 matrix. So we can 23, 16, and then 15 and 2. So now what we did, we asked the user to create the array, the matrix. So those values will be saved in the elements of this array. So also what we can do, we can further print the array to the screen to ensure everything is as expected. In order to do this, you can use the same nested for loop, and also you can print here the array is, you start a new line. Let's do a new line before the array as well. And then we're going to use a cout array of ij. We need a space, then we need to start a new line after each row. So cout a new line. So now let's execute this program and see what happens. So now we're asking the user to enter a 2 by 2 matrix, 16, 5, 10, and 8. And then the array is, as expected, 16, 5, 10, and 8. So lastly, let's see how we can add all the numbers within this array. So in order to do this, let's define an integer sum equal, initialize it to 0, and then we're going to have to loop through all the elements in the array. So let's use the nested for loops for this. So when we get to each element of the array, we need to add it to the sum. So what we can do, sum plus equal array ij, and when we're done, we can do cout the sum of the elements in the array is sum, and we can start a new line. Also, let's do a new line at the beginning. Now let's execute this program and verify. So what we're doing at every loop, we're adding the element to the sum. So we need a closed curly bracket for this for loop. So let's keep it simple. Let's do 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we printed the array 1, 2, 3, 4. The sum of the elements in the array is 10. 4 plus 3, 7, 8, 9, 10. So this is all on two-dimensional arrays in C++. I hope this tutorial was helpful. Thanks for watching.
Enjoyed this video? Subscribe to the Computer Engineering Notebook for more tutorials on computer architecture, embedded systems, and hardware design. And hit the bell to catch the next one.